Why is Jared Dillian slumming it, absolutely slumming it, into the forward of his book, Rule 62? You're going to want to listen to this. You're going to want to find out. We talk about how you can't teach voice and you can't teach imagination. And that is a profound statement for you creators out there, because that's two places you can have an advantage. Talk about the magic of sports talk radio. There's a San Francisco show I really have to go look up. And we talked about how a body of work and creating one that will outlast your physical body. Yeah, we get into the spiritual stuff too. It's all here. Jack Forehand, roll some clips.
My core assumption is that we're all people. We all go through the same shit. Like it's part of being a human being. So when I write about my own experiences, I just assume everybody else has done the same thing. I had a writing professor at SCAD that said that you can teach pretty much anything in writing except for two things: voice and imagination, right? You cannot teach voice and you cannot teach imagination. You either have it or you don't. When I lived out there 25 years ago, I used to listen to the Razor and Mr. T. The two of them were freaking hilarious. Like it was one of the best radio shows I have ever heard. Really, what I try to do is I try to leave behind, music, writing, art that is going to outlive me for decades and centuries and who knows. I write on average 3,000 to 4,000 words a day. About half of that is for the newsletter and about half of that is for other stuff. And if I don't write for a period of a week, I just get super grumpy and I'm miserable. I always have stuff rattling around my head that I need to get out on the computer screen. And if I don't get it out, it's like I'm constipated. You know what I mean?
You're watching Just Press Record right here on Cultish Creative YouTube. I'm Matt Ziegler. This is a special Oh Snap Guess What I Saw episode. Normally I'm inviting a guest back, but this time I'm inviting a guest because we have to have an extra special author book alert talk. I want to start with a clip from the book this time. And this is the best way to introduce him, I think, by examining how to handle failure. That sounds like a good place. Let's build him up a little. First of all, I was physically abused as a child. Raised by a single mother in not quite poverty, I was bullied occasionally. I was held back a year in Little League. I got poor grades in middle school. I got poor grades in high school. I didn't make the varsity baseball team. I got spit out of the bottom of the tennis team. I almost got in serious trouble one time. I got poor grades in college in spite of having the third highest SAT scores in my class. I almost got kicked out of college, which would have effectively ended my career in the Coast Guard. An injury ended my wrestling career. We got a page turn on this list, people. I was denied a command endorsement. I was never made senior VP at Lehman Brothers. I was paid half as much as my peers. Ultimately, I failed at Wall Street. 3 weeks in a psychiatric ward. Battled addictions. Slowest growing newsletter in the history of newsletters next to Cultish Creative. My first book's a failure. Second book's a failure. My radio show, an expensive failure. This is only expensive in the cost of your time, my friend. Essays are failure. Almost none of the mountains of content I have created over the years has ever gone viral, and my music career is a struggle, to say the least. You forgot one, sir, because now you are on an extremely obscure podcast with me, Jim. Investor, trader, author, musician, and still my favorite consumer of cat psychic services. And now I'm adding this to my list too. Supporter of Northeastern PA based cat themed tattoo artists, Mr. Jared Dillian. Welcome to the show.
Oh my God. That's great.
We're here because you put out a book, Rule 62.
Yes.
It's out now. We're very excited. I was so excited when this showed up in my mailbox the other day. And I said, hey, we got to get on. We got to talk about this. Now, first question, because truly you're slumming it on the forward for this one. But I'm talking about this word Sonder. And you said when we were chatting back and forth on this, you hadn't run into this word before. This is a new one for you. So let me do this. Go ahead.
It's funny when you wrote that about, because I hadn't heard of Sonder, but when you wrote about it in the foreword, like you essentially hit the essence of what I write about. Like really, I write about myself, and I assume that many other people have gone through similar things, right? And most people don't make that assumption. Most people make the assumption that they are truly unique and that the things that they are going through have never been experienced by anybody before, right? And my core assumption is that we're all people, we all go through the same shit. Like, it's part of being a human being. So when I write about my own experiences, I just assume everybody else has done the same thing, you know?
I feel like the magic in that, and I'm glad to hear you say that, not because I didn't fail the test miserably, but also because it's just important. Because there's this idea of, and so Sonder from the forward is the feeling you get when you realize everybody else's life is as complicated, as rich in detail, and is as emotionally all over the place as yours is. And the balance of what you said, you realize it about yourself when you're writing these stories down, but then Rule 62, title of the book, which is don't take yourself too damn seriously.
Yes.
How do you internalize that aspect of it, of just not taking yourself too damn seriously? And where'd that come from?
Well, we work in a business where we have a lot of people that take themselves very, very seriously, you know? Um, I've been part of Malden Economics for a long time, and Malden had the SIC conference, which was in person for a number of years, and it's been remote since then. And I remember I think I was at the Dallas conference, which was like 700 attendees. It's $1 million stage and, all the sound and light and stuff like that. And I was standing with somebody and we were looking at the program and it had the photographs of the speakers in the program. And we're looking at these photographs and they're these, very artistically done black and white photographs, like, in profile view and like all this stuff. And the guy I'm standing with, who I still cannot remember who it was, he said, "Man, these people take themselves really seriously." And I was like, "Yeah, that's not me at all, you know." I mean, not like I, don't like to get good pictures taken of me, but, I just, um, I'm just another bozo, I mean, really, seriously.
All
So,
right. Well, this is a perfect segue because we got to address this. We got to address the monster in the room here. I mean, this is the black and white picture in the back. Let's
yes.
let's be clear. What the hell are you sitting on in this picture?
Oh, that is one of my favorite possessions. So, that picture, hold it up again, hold it up again. That picture was taken in, my library in my house. This is my new house that I moved into a year ago, and, the library has a sheepskin chair, a chaise that you lay down in, and that's where I do all my reading. Like, I lay down in that chair and I read. So that's like my favorite spot in the house. Got all my books around me and stuff, like, and I can close the doors and just sit in there in perfect silence and read. So
Perfect silence with the sheepskin. I mean, if you're gonna take a picture seriously, this is the way you take a picture seriously in all the ways. Isn't it weird too, especially in a business and especially in the Wall Street stuff? Like everybody's wrong all the time. And it's just
I
a matter
know.
of it's so funny to me to have so many people who are obsessed with like perfection and detail and all this stuff. Yet you're going to get up and like if you're hitting 250 or 300, you're the hero of the universe. And that's just even that is rare.
Yeah, I mean, especially like on Twitter, like, I make predictions on Twitter. I make less of them now, but you make a prediction on Twitter and it turns out to be wrong. And like you have all these trolls that are like, "You were wrong." And I'm like, "So what? Like, we're all wrong. Like, come on. Like, it's whatever, you know? Like, I don't care." And some people feel shame about that, and they block the people and they do all this stuff. And I just, I don't care.
I got 5 little topic areas that I thought of as I was going through the book and looking at it again earlier today and thought, let's hit a couple of these topic areas. Let's talk through them together. I think they resonate with everything you just said too in a probably too perfect a way. I want to talk about anti-perfectionism first, and specifically this idea, direct quote, this was in the 80% solution chapter. You know it's better than perfect? Done. 80% in that thing. I think a lot of people might have an idea. They want to write something down. They want to send a tweet, whatever it might be. And they obsess over perfect and it never friggin' happens. And I think that's sad.
Yeah, I have worked with some perfectionists over the years. So my old literary agent, who's a very good friend of mine, he's a dear friend. Uh, we broke up like 4 or 5 months ago, and I hope he doesn't watch this, but he probably wouldn't mind me saying this. But he was a perfectionist. Like like everything had to be perfect, and therefore it took way longer than it needed to. So if I have a choice between having an 80 or 90% solution in a month or 100% solution in 6 months, I'm going to go with the 80% solution. And I've always been one of these people that have always had too much stuff to do. I have 3 businesses and I do a lot of things and I have hobbies and stuff like that. And I don't have time to make things perfect. My newsletter, the Daily Dirt Nap, there are some, I proofread them every morning. Sometimes some typos get through, you know, and occasionally, not very often, but sometimes people get really uptight about the typos. And I'm like, dude, like I've written 10 million words in the last 17 years. I don't care. Like it's fine. Um, Nassim Taleb has this whole thing about nitpickers, right? Which I think he's correct on. I think he's incorrect on a lot of things, but I think he's correct on this. And he said that his first book, Fooled by Randomness, has over 200 typos in it. And he just doesn't care. And people come at him on the typos, and he's like it's basically this philosophy that it's the big things that matter, not the little things. So I proofread everything I write, like even these essays that I put up on Substack, I do proofread them, but occasionally something will get through. I don't care. It's an 80% solution.
There's a weird thing that helps solve out too, or kind of like tease out, I feel like, in the nitpickers. Like the faster somebody labels themselves as a nitpicker, the faster I think you can kind of steer yourself around that
Yeah.
personality type. I don't know. We had somebody commenting in a YouTube video the other day, and it was like, "How dare you have this in an hour? I only have 20 minutes." It's like, well, you had 20 seconds to leave this comment. I don't know. I don't know how to help you, man. I'm sorry. All
Well,
right,
we're going
moving.
an hour today. We're going an hour.
Oh, just for that guy. But funny enough, I volunteered one of my co-hosts on this show because the person was like, maybe you don't give a squat about what I say. And I was like, well, what if we do a 20-minute summary version and I'll have the other guy do squats while he reads you the summary. Would you like that? Would that be good enough for your fine, polished tastes and your schedule? All right, another one, because I think this is a subset of the anti-perfectionism theme. This is authentic voice over polish. This comes up over and over again. And I love that you said this about the Goggins book. You said about David Goggins. The dude is barely literate, but he has a strong voice and it comes through, which is why the book is so popular. He's not trying to be someone he's not. That authentic voice thing, how do you think about that?
I mean, that is something that I've always had kind of naturally. I have very voicey prose. There's a voice in there. Some people have it, some people don't. I had a writing professor at SCAD that said that you can teach pretty much anything in writing except for 2 things: voice and imagination, right? You cannot teach voice and you cannot teach imagination. You either have it or you don't. David Goggins had this book, Can't Hurt Me, about his childhood and how he became a Navy SEAL and an endurance athlete and all this stuff. And I read 3 or 4 chapters of the book and I had to put it down. It was just it was so jarring. The prose was so jarring. But that book sold many millions of copies. And it's because they did not edit out his voice. Like his editor, I don't know who it was, but that person was smart enough to say, look, here's this guy with this really raw, intense voice. Now we can try to smooth it out and make it perfect and turn it into like this, you know, flowery whatever. But let's not do that. Like, let's just leave it as it is. Right. And, me as kind of a writing snob, I really couldn't read it, but there was something compelling about it. And I could see why people like that book, you know?
So funny enough, I had the same reaction. I tried to read the book at first. After a couple people told me, you got to read this book. You got to check this Goggins guy. It's a wild story. I was like, I believe you that it's a wild story. I can't handle reading this. And so then I tried the audiobook. And the audiobook worked way better for me
Oh,
because I
wow.
wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I'd have to go back and check, but I know he did it with somebody. I don't know if it was the editor. Could have been the co-writer too. At the end of every chapter, there was an actual conversation between Goggins and somebody who helped shape the book. And it was crazy to me because I had the exact same experience where I was like, his voice is coming across exactly in these words. He almost dictated this book in some way and somebody
Yeah.
just captured it. And I do admire that. I think about it a lot. One of my favorite things in the world, I have a guilty pleasure for like sports talk radio or like post
Oh, yeah.
game local station baseball. Just adore it because it's one of the few places I think we hear natural and organic voices. Like if you
You
read a
know,
transcript, it'd be dreadful. But what's that?
I don't know if you ever spent much time in San Francisco, but when I lived out there 25 years ago, I used to listen to the Razor and Mr. T.
Okay.
And
No, but say
Mr.
more.
T was this guy named Tom Tolbert who played for the Golden State Warriors. He was like 6'10". And the Razor was this guy named Ralph Barbieri who had an MBA from Wharton. And the two of them were freaking hilarious. Like it was one of the best radio shows I have ever heard. I used to listen to it all the time when I was driving around. So,
Just the two of them, or did they do call-ins too?
oh yeah, they did. I called in a couple times.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, the Razor and Mr. T just went up to my where in the YouTube archives or something. Does somebody have these uploaded? That's awesome. Uh, Related, this is a subset of that one. When you're talking about authentic voice trumps technical perfection, you also talked about it in the chapter on critical and commercial success. I'm thinking about that in reaching audiences. You already said you broke up with your prior book relationship before this one. You made the move to you self-published this book, right?
I did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
What's it mean to you to say I just want these out in the world in this format and I'm going to opt to you're not J.K. Rowling because of this decision maybe.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very long discussion. I have 6 books and 2 of them have been traditionally published and 3 of them have been self-published and one of them was kind of a hybrid. And the reason I have self-published books, there's been a couple reasons. One, because my old agent had said that he couldn't sell them, right? So if he can't sell them, then I'm faced with a decision. Well, do I just sit on it or do I just self-publish it and just get it out there, And I choose to just get it out there. I mean, I have a pretty big presence, so I can sell some books. And the way I look at it is that any book I publish is it's a free option, right? Like, you never know, Rule 62 might go viral.
You
Who
never know.
knows?
You never
Maybe
know.
it will, it doesn't seem to be so far, but you never know. It might get picked up by Consuelo Mac or, somebody on PBS or, who knows? Might get picked up by somebody. And then the economics are very good. The economics of a self-published book is you essentially get 70% of the cover price. So, so I just look at it as like a cheap option. And and like you said, I just want to get it out in the world, you know. And I think there's a pretty good chance that people will discover all this stuff once I'm dead. I think there's a pretty good chance that that's going to happen. So,
You know, that reality of it, and not to just dig into the dirt nap part of even just that idea of that's the thing that breaks it, but that's a whole other legacy angle to think of it that way. It almost makes making it a little bit worth it, right? Like even if they discover it after you're dead, it doesn't make it monetarily worth it, but that's not what you're after. That's never
yeah,
part of this goal.
yeah, yeah. Which I actually talked about in the legacy chapter,
Right.
right? Like I talked about, really what I try to do is I try to leave behind, music, writing, art that is going to outlive me for decades and centuries and who knows. So,
Third topic I have for you, creative courage. And a big part of this thing is, and you have a chapter, say yes to things. And I'm a huge believer and endorser of this point, and I love this statement. When given a choice between taking an opportunity and not taking an opportunity, I always choose the former because, as the great Joaquin Andujar once said, you never know. That phrase, you never know. What a friggin' line that is.
Yeah, so that's sort of truncated. The exact quote from Joaquin Andujar, who was a pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, he said, "My favorite word in the English language is you never know." But I mean, he was really talking about baseball because in baseball anything can happen, you know. But in Say Yes to Things, I was really talking about this idea that you regret the opportunities you don't take more than the ones that you do take that don't work out. You know what I mean? I recently started managing money. Started a CTA about a year ago. It's still very small. But I was thinking about doing this. I mean, this is the kind of framework. And by the way, this is the exact same thing that Jeff Bezos said about Amazon, right? Because somebody asked him once, why did you start Amazon? And he basically said, well, if 20 years from now I didn't start Amazon, I would always be regretting it, you know? So it's really the same concept. It's kind of like future regret minimization, you know?
Yeah, which is a whole strategy and approach. So related to that too is, and this is in Contempt Prior to Investigation, there's a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. I'm thinking about that in terms of just exploring new things or being willing to take that shot. Am I wrong to connect those ideas?
Yeah, that's similar. It I don't know. I can't remember if I talked about this in that chapter, but are you familiar with the Big Five personality test?
I am. I am. Yeah.
Okay, so you know about openness,
Right.
right? Openness is about the willingness to try new things. And I think about this a lot because I'm a DJ actually. And there are some places in the country that you go where there's a high level of openness, and there are other places which have a low level of openness. Like in Myrtle Beach has a very low level of openness. Like if I were playing in a club in Myrtle Beach, everyone would be like, what the hell is this? They want to hear the same music that they hear over and over again, and they would leave, you know? But if you play in New York, or if you play in Chicago, or if you play in San Francisco, people go there to be exposed to new music. They have a very high level of openness, right? So, contempt prior to investigation, um, which, as Herbert Spencer said, can keep you in everlasting ignorance. But when presented with a new idea, it's really about openness. Like you have to be willing to try it. I mean, within limits, right? Like obviously you don't want to do things that are illegal or anything like that. But it's all about openness.
When you think about that in the creative sense, because, and specifically on the DJ point, there's going to a place where you know people are going to be open it, and then you could be open because you know they're going to be open and you
Yep.
can design a set around it. But there's something different too when you're reading the room and saying, I know the room is not open, but I can still give us a good time. Whether or not you do that as an artist, I'm just curious how you think about it internal versus external or with others.
What do you mean internal versus external?
Like I'm a DJ, I show up, how much am I paying attention to the room to make sure I have the right
Oh,
night?
I mean, this is really kind of like music inside baseball, but um, I really believe that part of my job as a DJ is actually to educate people and to expose them to things they've never been exposed to before. So generally, I just play whatever the hell I want, and if people don't like it, then too bad. And if nobody likes it, then I don't get invited back, and that's fine. It's fine. So
So it's like the stubborn comedians. I use stubborn in air quotes or loosely here. Like insistence on I'm going to get up and say the jokes that I think are funny. And
yes,
if you didn't get it, like Norm Macdonald doing the stare on Weekend
yes,
Update,
yes.
I'm relishing in the silence at my bomb's joke.
Norm Macdonald, by the way, he was awesome for a bunch of reasons, but if he went to a comedy club and he bombed, he would actually greet people at the door as they were leaving. Like he would shake everybody's hand if he bombed. If he killed, he actually wouldn't do that.
I, I want to say I want to say it was Sam Kinison. And I think it's a Norm Macdonald story about finding out that Sam had a deal with one of the clubs they would play or do. And the deal was basically if the guy could empty out the room. And he's like, so once in a while he'd be on stage and he'd be bombing. And he'd realize I could finally win the bet. Empty out the room. And he's like, to watch a man go deliberate on clearing out a room just to see if he could do it is an entire other work of art. I think about that a lot. All right, I want to talk about this is my fourth one, work as a spiritual practice. I think this is really interesting because I think a lot about how working, writing, doing stuff like that, that's kind of the happy place. That's most of my favorite thing to do. You say in one of the chapters, if I didn't write every day, I would never mind. I would be pretty unhappy to say the least. And you also say when we stop creating, we die. What's that connection for you? Why spiritual practice? Why does it feel that weighty?
Um, Gosh, I just I write every day, right? I write on average 3 to 4 thousand words a day. About half of that is for the newsletter, and about half of that is for other stuff. And if I don't write for a period of a week, I get really grumpy. Like I just get super grumpy and I'm miserable. And I always have stuff rattling around my head that I need to get out on the computer screen. And if I don't get it out, it's like I'm constipated. You know what I mean? Like I just so I mean, I talk a little bit about creativity in one of my previous books, Those Bastards, which was another essay collection. I talk a little bit about creativity there. The reality is that most people are not creative people, right? Like if you go to any trading floor in New York, or any job or in Amazon distribution center or whatever, the vast majority of these people are not writing, they're not creating music. Some of them are, but the vast majority of them are not. I think the creatives are really a small minority of people. Um, and it's really and then you have to think about, why do you create, right? Do you do it for yourself? Do you do it for other reasons? I do it for myself, you know, which, as I told you, is like the whole reason I published this book, is because I just want to get it out there. Um, so yeah, but for me, it is a spiritual endeavor.
What's the longest you ever went? Or is there a period of time where you took a long break and you realized just how much you need it?
No, I've taken probably the longest break I've taken is about 10 days. And it's I just wasn't happy. I have been writing pretty much every day since 2004. Since 2004. So,
It's a funny thing to say once you know it, once you know it's of yourself and you know it's part of your personality, like, why would you not do it? Why would you do it any less?
I will say that I had this novel that I'm working on, which is going to be commercial fiction, which is something new for me. And I'm about 25% of the way into the novel. And this is the first piece of writing that I procrastinate on. Like, I don't know what it is about this book. I mean, first of all, it's hard, like novels are hard. But there's something about this project, like, I mean, why do people procrastinate? Because something is unpleasant, or it's hard, or there's easier things they would rather do. Like, I've been working on this for about 6 months, and I need to get my ass in gear. And it is, man, there is something about this book. I can't do it.
A novel is that is an intimidating endeavor. So even the fact that
Yeah.
you're 25% in, do you feel like it's important to have a novel just because a commercial novel in your repertoire feels like it's a challenge you want to have? What's the draw to doing it?
Well, I do like writing fiction better than nonfiction. Night Moves is still my favorite book, and one of these days you have to read All the Evil of This World.
Oh, I've
I
read it.
can send you a
Oh,
copy if
good.
you want.
We'll
Night
do a
Moves.
different one. Night Moves is
Yeah.
here. All the Evil and some of the other ones are back there on the shelf still.
Yeah. I like fiction is generally more fun for me, partly because it is more of a challenge. But I don't know what it is about this one.
Something's there. We'll see where it goes. All right, I got number 5 for you. And this is about an artist's relationship with success. So I'm going back to the critical and commercial success thing, partly just because I love the sentence. You made a comparison between James Patterson as commercial and Barry Hannah as critical, and you were saying, I would rather write good books that nobody reads than bad books that everyone does. So first off, are we throwing punches, James Patterson, or are we just saying, what are we doing?
Well, I later in that piece, I actually I say nice things about James Patterson
Yes.
because it is
Shout
art.
him out.
It is art. I would call it art. It is, you know.
Listen, we're talking about sports talk radio. Calling radio is art. So yes, James Patterson has a seat at that table too.
Yeah, yeah. So, no, I mean it's funny because the last time we spoke, we were talking about Barry Hannah, and it was funny. I realized I hadn't read as much of him as I thought I had. So I went and bought all the rest of his books that I didn't own, and I'm working my way through them. And it is just incredible. Actually, it's funny because Airships and another one have just been bought for another printing. So people are still reading his stuff. So
They're still out there and available, and I did pull this off. It's living on my shelf. My copy of Bear
yeah.
Ships. That is the way it continues to exist. It's like Barry is a case of somebody. Barry Hannah was not really known or embraced until after his death, and even still, it's like it feels like it's a slow burn with him. But there's
Yeah.
something tremendously respectable about that arc.
I read there's actually Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi Press has a collection of interviews with him. Which is fascinating if you get manage to get your hands on a copy. I got a copy when I was in Oxford. Um, but it was funny because one of his last interviews, his last book, Yonder Stands Your Orphan, was published in 2000,
6 earlier
somewhere
than that.
around there, and he
Yeah,
passed away a couple years later.
right.
But he was very proud of that book because it was his first airport book. It was the first book of his that was being sold in airport, and it got a great New York Times review and all that stuff. I bought it when it came out, but even Barry, I mean, even a guy like him, like for him to have a book that was being sold in airports was like a big deal to him. So I think we all crave that kind of commercial success, whether we profess to or not. Like even if you are Barry Hannah or somebody like him, Tobias Wolff or Raymond Carver or something like that, like, and you have this very small but dedicated following. Like, I think everybody has this desire to sell 6 million copies of something someday, you know?
The money's not bad, but the social validation is kind of nice. It's kind of
Yeah.
nice to think I could actually resonate or reach people, and especially with words. Do you feel like there's a difference on reaching people with words versus reaching people with music?
There is a difference. I think writing is a little bit more of an intellectual exercise, where music is a little bit more of an emotional exercise, although they both have elements of that. Um, yeah. I mean, I do both. So,
Yeah, so I was curious how you thought about the separation. The intellectual versus the emotional aspect is really interesting, though, because
yeah.
it's just the way we connect with these forms of art, right? Like that's always going to be a different thing across the board here. So besides selling 6 million copies, like what are your hopes? What are your hopes for this book? What's a good message, email, note you get from somebody as they're encountering this thing for the first time in the world?
I've gotten some great notes from people. I got an email from somebody yesterday who read the first essay and then bought 6 more copies. He didn't read any more of the book. He read the first essay and then he bought 6 more copies. I mean, it's a long book, so people are still kind of working through it.
Right.
I've had people tell me they're halfway through. It's wonderful. I haven't gotten a single piece of negative feedback on this book. And no nitpickers either. So
Not yet. There's time for the
not yet.
nitpickers.
Yeah.
They'll come out. That's how to do it. No, but I think it's a good validation, and it's also the process of writing this book, talk about what you were sharing in advance, what you're holding on to. How do you think through that process? How do you think about what belongs in a book versus what just belongs on the internet somewhere?
Well, when I first started that blog, I was writing about all kinds of stuff. I was writing about like sex dolls and, crazy shit. And which was fun. And then as I got deeper into it, I found that I kept coming back to this theme of success and spirituality, particularly spirituality. And um, after writing the blog for 3 or 4 years, I had a collection of maybe about 120 essays that kind of fit the mold, and then I cut them further. Like this book is actually pretty curated. I started with a much bigger manuscript. I started with about 160,000 words, and I cut it down to about 115,000. So this is actually very curated.
My last big topic question for you before I let you go in this book. I am consistently impressed with, it's one of my favorite. Are you a David Sedaris fan at all? Do you
A little
appreciate
bit,
David?
yeah, a
A
little
little
bit.
bit? Okay. One of my favorite things about David Sedaris is I am convinced pound for pound, he writes some of the best openings on any of the essays or chapters or things that he writes. I love his openings. I'm fascinated by them. I enjoy them deeply. I will take a book of David Sedaris and I'll read just the first paragraph, and then my brain is on fire to go do other things with my life or my day. With you, I get almost the same feeling from your last paragraphs. A,
Oh, interesting.
are you aware of this? Is there something in your brain? Like I could spot check this book, and it's the last paragraphs where you have a way of just compressing an idea into the close on these that is really friggin' impressive, but also unique to you. Do you think about this at all?
So, getting back to music, do you remember in like the 70s and 80s, all the songs would like fade out? Like songs didn't end,
Yes.
they did the fade away. You know
The
what I
fade
mean?
away, the drift off, which
Yeah.
is
And then somewhere in the 80s and 90s, they would actually end the song, and which is pretty much the way it is today. Like you end the song. So, the fade away was cheating. You know what I mean? Like I can't think of an ending to this song, so I'm just gonna let it like drift off. But like an ending something, like nailing the dismount is very hard. That's hard to do. You know what I mean? I don't. I actually agree with you. I think I have a talent for doing that, but I really don't know how I do that. It Who knows?
it's the fade away, and I can't remember exactly on this, but I know some of that stems back to just technical limitations and radio limitations. So the fade away was basically created to accommodate, oh, you only have this much time on this. So
Yep.
it's actually easier to fade it than put like a perfectly timed conclusion on the song.
Yep.
And then there's also some weird radio formatting piece of that history that I'm forgetting right now. But there's something about knowing how to land something and to close that loop on an idea. It's almost like a logical argument. If you don't have an ending for it, a lot of times stuff just drifts off and it like just floats out into space.
Well, I mean, a lot of people's criticism of Night Moves, my short story collection, was that you did not have tied up endings at the end. They weren't like
Story arc endings, though, which is
story
different
arc
than,
endings.
yeah, which is
Yes.
different from the satisfaction of a appropriate point to stop telling the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you feel like did you learn more of that from going to get the MFA, or was that just an intuition?
That was just intuition. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Trust the intuition. You should get a copy of Rule 62. You should read at least all the last paragraphs. You can get that endorsement from me. But if you're really brave, dive into the rest. Jared, if people want to buy a copy of the book, they want to follow you, bug you on the internet, they want to nitpick you, where should they look you up?
Um. So I actually have a cool author website.
All right.
So you just go to jareddillian.com, has all my books there. Um, and you can also get a hold of me through there. There's like a contact me page, whatever. You can contact me there. Twitter, at Daily Dirt Nap. And this thing it's not just on Amazon. It's also Barnes and Noble and, all the other places. So you can get it anywhere.
There you go. Self-publish your book, get it anywhere. I think there's a lesson inside of that somewhere that I like the sounds of. Jared, thanks so much for coming on Just Press Record.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and hey, subscribe below to Cultish Creative on YouTube if you haven't already. As the good compliance people want me to remind you, Matt Ziegler, that's me, is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments. No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of clients of Sunpoint Investments. I hope you've been entertained. I hope you found this useful. I hope you talk to a professional before you try any of this stuff at home. And most of all, I hope you've subscribed. Be nice to each other out there. And don't forget, head over to cultishcreative.com and let's make curiosity a habit together. And I'm out.